In February of 1957, in a quiet, wooded patch of Philadelphia's Fox Chase neighborhood, a single tragic discovery would anchor itself in the public imagination for more than half a century. Tucked away off a rural road, a young boy, believed to be no older than 4 to 6 years, was found lifeless inside a discarded cardboard box. He was naked, wrapped in a worn and threadbare blanket. His body bore signs of prolonged neglect, malnutrition, and abuse. Bruises mottled his skin, and his hair appeared recently, roughly cut, with loose clippings still clinging to his fragile form. No one present that day could have guessed how long his true name would remain hidden, nor how deeply his plight would burrow into the nation's collective conscience. He would be remembered as the boy in the box, an anonymous child who stood as a solemn testament to how easily a vulnerable life can slip through society's grasp. From the moment authorities arrived, the Philadelphia Police Department threw its weight into identifying this unknown victim. The 1950s was an era of changing social landscapes and rising media influence, and the public expected swift answers when tragedy emerged. Detectives circulated thousands of flyers regionally and even beyond state borders. Newspapers published the child's description, and television news programs featured urgent pleas for any scrap of information. In a remarkably humanizing attempt, investigators dressed the boy's body in typical children's clothing and photographed him, hoping the image would stir a memory in some distant relative or a concerned citizen who might recognize his face. Yet no family came forward. No local pastor recalled a missing congregant's child. No teacher reported a vanished student. Silence pressed in from all sides, compounding the tragedy with a profound lack of closure. In the absence of modern forensic science, the investigation was conducted almost entirely by hand. Detectives examined hospital birth records, visited orphanages and foster homes, scoured adoption agency files, and cross-referenced every known case of missing children. Despite countless interviews, tireless legwork, and mounting public frustration, the leads shriveled into dead ends. Rumors took root in the fertile ground of uncertainty. Some whispered that the boy might have been the abandoned child of transient carnival workers or migrant farmhands passing through. Others imagined a hidden household of cruelty where no one dared speak of abuse. Without a proper name or documented history, the case drifted into a grim limbo. As time wore on, the story of the nameless boy refused to vanish. In the decades that followed, the case stood as an archetype of an unsolved mystery, re-emerging periodically in headlines and investigative television specials. Journalists recounted the known facts, magazines ran retrospectives, and neighborhood storytellers passed the chilling tale between generations. When the internet age dawned, online forums and true crime communities seized upon the case with renewed vigor. Amateur sleuths examined every scrap of evidence they could find, scanned newspaper clippings, old police reports, crime scene sketches, hoping to spark fresh insight. Retired officers, still troubled by the case's inertia, granted interviews that kept public interest alive. This persistent, decades-long attention ensured that the boy would never fade into the dusty archives of forgotten crimes. The 21st century brought a revolution in forensic science. Techniques once confined to the dreams of visionary detectives gradually became standard practice. DNA analysis, once prohibitively complex and expensive, grew precise and accessible. Over time, genetic genealogy, a cutting-edge method of identifying unknown individuals by comparing their DNA to samples submitted by everyday people researching their ancestry, emerged as a powerful tool. Suddenly, cases that had languished in obscurity began to yield long-buried truths. It was only natural that the boy in the box case would be revisited under this new, revealing light. The process was anything but simple. Forensic genealogists extracted DNA from the preserved remains and painstakingly tested it, comparing the genetic markers against massive, ever-expanding genealogical databases. This was delicate and methodical work, akin to assembling a complex family puzzle from fragments scattered across time and geography. A distant cousin here, a great-great-grandparent's lineage there. Piece by piece, the genealogists narrowed down potential family lines. Months turned into years as they navigated tangled webs of relatives, intermarriages, and migrations. And all the while, the question remained: could science finally give this child back his name? In December 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department and partnering genealogists announced a startling breakthrough. After more than 6 decades of painful anonymity, the boy in the box had been identified as Joseph Augustus Zarelli. This moment, long anticipated by anyone who had followed the case, felt both triumphant and tragic. On one hand, Joseph was no longer a mystery. He had a documented name, a genealogical fingerprint connecting him to a family tree. On the other hand, the truth of what happened to him, who was responsible for his suffering, why he was abandoned, and how no one raised an alarm, remained locked behind the veil of time. Identification was a crucial step forward, yet it unearthed as many questions as it answered. Still, the impact of Joseph's identification cannot be overstated. For the dedicated detectives who had worked on the case in the 1950s, for the armchair investigators who spent countless hours reviewing evidence, and for the public that had refused to forget him, this development was a collective sigh of relief. It proved that no victim is beyond hope of recognition. It affirmed that, with persistence and evolving technology, even the darkest mysteries can yield some measure of truth. Joseph would no longer be a blank space in history, a footnote in criminal annals. He was a real child, part of a human story, and that fact alone helps restore his dignity. The identification also underscores broader social and ethical questions. How could such a crime have gone unnoticed? How did entire communities overlook a missing child of such a young age? Joseph's case challenges us to do better, to pay closer attention to vulnerable children today, and to ask hard questions about how we respond to signs of abuse. It reminds us that these cases are not just puzzles. They are tragedies with very real human stakes. The more we learn from historical horrors, the better equipped we are to prevent similar cruelty in the present. Moreover, Joseph's story shines a light on the synergy between public interest and technological progress. Without decades of sustained attention, through journalism, documentaries, podcasts, online forums, and the quiet efforts of dedicated researchers, this case might have faded into obscurity. Society's unwillingness to let the matter rest ultimately set the stage for its eventual partial resolution. The persistence of memory, coupled with breakthroughs in DNA research and genealogical methods, proved that time and silence need not be insurmountable obstacles. As we speak Joseph Augustus Zarelli's name today, we honor the life that was once lost in anonymity. We acknowledge the darkness he endured, while also celebrating the fact that he can finally be counted among the named and remembered. Although justice may still be elusive, and many details remain murky, identifying Joseph is a profound moral victory. It challenges us to remain vigilant and compassionate, to invest in the families and children around us, and to never lose faith in our collective capacity to find truth, even when it has been buried for generations. This case, now partially illuminated, stands as a beacon to investigators, historians, and communities worldwide. Every time we crack a cold case through modern methods, we send a clear message. Victims will not be forgotten, no matter how many decades lie between their tragedy and our present moment. Each new piece of information we uncover about Joseph's life, each fresh lead spurred by his identification, draws us closer to understanding what befell him. And even if the full story remains elusive, we hold on to the fact that we know who he was. He is no longer the boy in the box. He is Joseph Augustus Zarelli, an innocent child whose identity, at least, has been rescued from the shadows of history.